Judas Iscariot committed the most well-known act of betrayal in human history, selling out Jesus Christ to his enemies for 30 pieces of silver. His actions directly led to Jesus' arrest, trial, and execution, making him the ultimate traitor in both the religious and historical senses. But why did he do it? And what happened to him afterwards? Judas was one of Jesus' 12 disciples, personally chosen to follow him and spread his teachings. He was even trusted as the group's treasurer, handling their money. Yet he conspired with the chief priests to betray him. At the time, the religious leaders of Jerusalem were desperate to get rid of Jesus. His teachings challenged their authority, and his growing popularity threatened their power. So they wanted to take him out. But there was a problem. Jesus was loved by the crowds. Arresting him publicly could cause an uprising, so they needed a way to capture him in secret. That's where Judas came in. The Gospel of Matthew notes that Judas approached the Jewish authorities himself, asking, "What will you give me if I deliver him to you?" They counted out 30 pieces of silver, about 4 months' wages at the time. The deal was struck, and from that moment, Judas looked for an opportunity to betray Jesus. That opportunity came in the Garden of Gethsemane at night, away from the crowds. To make sure the soldiers arrested the right man, Judas gave them a signal. He would identify Jesus with a kiss. He walked up to Jesus, greeted him as Rabbi, and kissed him on the cheek. That was the moment the guards seized Jesus and took him away. But Judas's story didn't end there. After seeing Jesus condemned to death, he was consumed with regret. He went back to the priests, threw the silver at them, and declared, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." They refused to take it back. Overcome with guilt, Judas took his own life. Benedict Arnold was once a hero of the American Revolution and one of George Washington's most trusted generals. But by 1780, Arnold would be remembered as America's most infamous traitor. Arnold was a brilliant military leader, but he felt underappreciated by the American government. Despite his victories, Congress passed him over for promotions, and others took credit for his successes. He was also deeply in debt. After using his own money to fund the war effort, he saw little financial reward in return. Frustrated and bitter, Arnold began secret negotiations with the British. In 1779, he reached out to British Major John Andre and offered to switch sides in exchange for money and a high-ranking position in the British Army. At the time, Arnold was in command of West Point, a critical American fort on the Hudson River. If the British controlled it, they could cut off New England from the rest of the colonies, which would potentially be a war-ending blow in Britain's favor. Arnold agreed to surrender the fort to the British for £20,000, worth millions today. But his plan fell apart. American forces captured Major Andre before he could return to British lines. They found documents exposing Arnold's betrayal hidden in Andre's boot. Arnold fled, barely escaping to a British warship on the Hudson River. After switching sides, Arnold led British raids against his former countrymen, including attacks on Virginia and Connecticut. When the war ended, he moved to England. To this day, his name is synonymous with treachery. On March 15, 44 BC, a group of Roman senators surrounded Julius Caesar in the Senate chamber and stabbed him to death. Among them was Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar deeply trusted. Brutus wasn't just another senator, he was a close friend of Caesar, and had even been spared by him after fighting against him in a civil war. Instead of punishment, Caesar rewarded Brutus with power and influence. So why would Brutus turn against the man who had shown him mercy? It was his fear of dictatorship. At the time, Rome was a republic, and many senators feared that Caesar, who had recently been declared dictator for life, was planning to abolish democracy and make himself king. While some conspirators like Gaius Cassius Longinus, Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus, and Servilius Casca acted out of personal ambition, Brutus was convinced he was saving the republic by removing Caesar. On the Ides of March, March 15th, Brutus and his fellow senators lured Caesar to the Senate. The moment he took his seat, they attacked him with daggers. Servilius Casca was the first to strike, stabbing Caesar in the shoulder or neck. The other senators rushed in, stabbing wildly. Caesar fought back, but he was hopelessly outnumbered. Legend says that as Caesar fell, he looked at Brutus and uttered his famous last words, "Et tu, Brute?" "You too, Brutus?" to express his shock that someone he trusted had turned against him. With over 20 stab wounds, Caesar's life ended then and there. The assassination threw Rome into chaos. Brutus and his allies failed to restore the Republic. Caesar's supporters, led by Mark Antony and Octavian, later Augustus, hunted them down. Brutus fled and raised an army, but was ultimately defeated in battle. Knowing capture meant execution, Brutus took his own life. Vidkun Quisling was supposed to defend his country from the invaders, but instead he collaborated with Adolf Hitler and sided with Nazi Germany. Before the war, Quisling was a Norwegian politician and military officer. He had served as Norway's Minister of Defense and later founded a political party called National Unity Party, Nasjonalsamling. His ideology was strongly pro-fascist, and he admired Hitler's authoritarian rule. However, he never gained much public support. His party failed in elections, and Norwegians largely saw him as a political outsider. In 1940, Hitler launched a surprise invasion of Norway. Instead of resisting the Germans, Quisling worked with them. As the invasion began, he went on national radio and declared himself the leader of Norway, claiming to rule in cooperation with the Nazis. This was not authorized by the Norwegian government, and his self-proclaimed government was ignored. In the meantime, Norwegian forces continued resisting. However, the German invasion was eventually successful, and they installed their own military occupation government. In 1942, Hitler allowed Quisling to serve as minister-president under German rule. As Norway's Nazi-backed leader, Quisling helped deport Norwegian Jews to concentration camps. He used Norwegian resources to support the German war effort, and he also suppressed Norwegian resistance movements with brutal force. In 1945, after Germany surrendered, Quisling was arrested, tried for treason, and sentenced to death. That same year, he was executed by firing squad. Vidkun Quisling's betrayal was so despised that his name became a permanent insult. To this day, calling someone a Quisling means they are a traitor willing to sell out their own people. Mir Jafar changed the course of India and paved the way for British colonial rule. By turning against his own leader, he ensured his own rise to power, but at the cost of his country's freedom. The British East India Company was expanding its power in India. They wanted complete control over Bengal, which was one of India's wealthiest regions. But Bengal's ruler, Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah, opposed British influence and clashed with them repeatedly. Seeing an opportunity, British commander Robert Clive began plotting with Mir Jafar, who was the commander of the Bengal army at the time. In secret meetings, the British promised Jafar that if he helped them overthrow Siraj-ud-Daulah, they would make him the new Nawab of Bengal. Jafar agreed. He promised to hold back his troops during battle and give the British an easy victory. On June 23, 1757, British and Bengal forces clashed at Plassey. Siraj-ud-Daulah expected his full army to fight, but Mir Jafar and his men stood by and did nothing. Although outnumbered, British forces crushed Siraj-ud-Daulah's army. After the battle, the British kept their promise and made Mir Jafar the new Nawab of Bengal. But his rule was nothing more than a puppet government controlled by the British. When he later tried to resist British influence, they removed him from power and replaced him. Jafar later briefly regained his position, but by then his reputation was ruined. The people of Bengal saw him as a traitor who had sold out his country to foreign invaders. He passed away in 1765, despised, but his legacy lives on. Still today, the word Mir Jafar in Bengali and the phrase Mir Jafar in Urdu mean a backstabber willing to betray their own people. Wang Jingwei was once a respected revolutionary, a man who fought for China's independence. But during World War II, he became one of China's most infamous traitors, siding with Imperial Japan as they invaded his homeland. Wang Jingwei was once a close ally of Sun Yat-sen, the father of modern China. He played a major role in overthrowing the Qing dynasty and helped establish the Republic of China in 1912. At first, he was seen as a patriotic leader, deeply committed to China's future. However, after Sun Yat-sen's death, Wang's political ambitions clashed with the new leader of the Chinese Nationalist Party. He lost the power struggle and became increasingly bitter and disillusioned. Then, in the late 1930s, Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China. Instead of fighting, he sought peace with Japan, arguing that China should collaborate rather than resist. In 1940, he defected and set up a puppet government in Nanjing, completely under Japanese control. Under Japanese occupation, Wang ruled as the head of the reorganized national government of China, but had little real power. He promoted Japanese policies, suppressed Chinese resistance fighters, and helped Japan control Chinese resources. His government was widely viewed as illegitimate and treasonous. In 1944, Wang fled to Japan for medical treatment. He died that year before he could be tried for treason. Philippe Pétain went from national hero to Nazi collaborator. Here's how. In May 1940, the French army suffered crushing defeats to the invading German troops. By June, German troops were marching into Paris. Pétain, then 84 years old, was appointed prime minister, but instead of rallying the country to resist, he called for an armistice with Hitler. On June 22, 1940, France officially surrendered. But Pétain did more than just accept defeat. He actively worked with the Nazis. After France's surrender, Germany occupied the northern half of the country, while Pétain ruled the southern half from the city of Vichy. Although he claimed to be protecting France, his government willingly cooperated with Hitler. Under Pétain's rule, the Vichy government helped deport over 75,000 French Jews to Nazi concentration camps. He also crushed the French resistance, arresting and executing those who fought back. While Charles de Gaulle and the Free French forces fought to liberate France, Pétain called them traitors and insisted that collaborating with Hitler was the only way to save France. By 1944, the Allies invaded France, and the Nazis abandoned the Vichy government. Pétain fled to Germany, but after the war he was captured and put on trial for treason. In 1945, he was convicted and sentenced to death, though the sentence was later reduced to life in prison due to his age. He died in exile in 1951. Ion Antonescu was yet another traitor who betrayed his country and aligned with Hitler. At one time, he was a strong nationalist leader who could restore Romania's power. Instead, he led the country into an alliance with Nazi Germany, where he willingly aided Hitler's war efforts and played a key role in the Holocaust in Eastern Europe. It was 1940, and Romania had lost large portions of its territory to the Soviet Union, Hungary, and Bulgaria. King Carol II's government was seen as weak and corrupt, and the people demanded change. Seeing an opportunity, Antonescu, a former army general, staged a coup. With the support of the fascist Iron Guard, he forced King Carol II to abdicate and took control of the government. He declared himself essentially a dictator. Believing Germany would help Romania reclaim lost territories, Antonescu aligned the country with Hitler and joined Operation Barbarossa, the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. Antonescu was one of Hitler's most loyal partners. He willingly carried out the Holocaust in Romanian-controlled regions and sent entire communities to camps or mass execution sites. By 1944, the tide of the war had turned. The Soviet Red Army was advancing, and Romania was on the verge of invasion. Sensing imminent defeat, King Michael I, with support from anti-fascist politicians, staged a coup on August 23, 1944. Antonescu was arrested and handed over to the Soviets. After the war, he was put on trial for war crimes and convicted for his role in the atrocities. In 1946, he was executed by firing squad. As a CIA officer, Aldrich Ames had access to some of the United States' most classified intelligence, but instead of protecting national security, he sold secrets to the Soviet Union for millions of dollars, and in so caused the deaths of American spies and massively damaged U.S. intelligence. Ames originally joined the CIA in 1962 and spent years working on Soviet counterintelligence. He seemed like a loyal American, but Ames walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and offered to sell U.S. secrets. His first sell alone earned him $50,000, and over the next decade, he leaked details on U.S. spying techniques, intelligence operations, and counter-espionage efforts. He exposed the identities of at least 25 American informants to the Soviet Union. At least 10 of them were executed by the KGB. In total, Ames collected $2.7 million for his espionage, and he was spending it like no ordinary government worker. He paid $540,000 in cash for a new house in Virginia. He drove a Jaguar and wore expensive suits. He took lavish vacations and deposited large sums of money in foreign banks. All of this on his $60,000 salary. By 1993, his level of spending raised alarms, and U.S. intelligence realized that they had a mole in the CIA. In 1994, Ames was arrested. His wife was also arrested for aiding his crimes. Ames pleaded guilty to espionage and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. James Wilkinson was a rising military leader in post-revolutionary America, but he was secretly living a double life as Agent Number 13 and swore his loyalty to Spain. Wilkinson rose quickly through the ranks during the American Revolution. After the war, he settled in Kentucky. The area was dependent on trade along the Mississippi River, which was controlled by Spain. Many frontier settlers saw an opportunity to align themselves with Spanish authorities for better trade access. Wilkinson saw an opportunity as well, but for himself. In 1787, Wilkinson traveled to New Orleans, then under Spanish rule, and swore an oath of loyalty to Spain. In exchange, Spanish officials promised him money and political favors if he could encourage Kentucky and other Western territories to break away from the United States and align with Spain instead. Over the next decade, Wilkinson funneled intelligence to Spain and revealed U.S. military operations and expansion plans. Despite his secret loyalty to a foreign power, he continued to climb the ranks of the U.S. military and was later appointed governor of the Louisiana Territory. His double life grew even more complicated in the early 1800s, when Aaron Burr, former vice president of the United States, approached him with a controversial plan. Burr was gathering support for an expedition into the Western Territories. Though his true intentions remained unclear, some suspected he aimed to seize Spanish land, while others believed he wanted to create an independent nation. Wilkinson initially appeared to support the scheme, but when rumors of treason spread, he quickly backed away. To protect his own position, he turned on Burr, warning President Jefferson and positioning himself as a loyal defender of the U.S. government. Burr was arrested and put on trial for treason, though he was ultimately acquitted. Despite growing suspicions about Wilkinson's true loyalties, he escaped consequences for years. His secret dealings were finally exposed in the late 1810s, when Spanish records confirmed he had been working as Agent Number 13 in Spain's intelligence network. By that time, however, he was no longer in power and never faced trial. In 480 BC, the Persian king Xerxes I launched a massive invasion of Greece. To block his advance, Leonidas and his 300 Spartan warriors took a defensive position at Thermopylae, a narrow coastal pass where the Persians couldn't use their overwhelming numbers to their advantage. For 2 days, the Greek forces held the pass, cutting down thousands of Persian soldiers and preventing their advance. The Spartans had trained for close combat and fought in tight formations that made them nearly impossible to break. Despite their small numbers, they were winning the battle. That's when Ephialtes stepped in. Ephialtes was a local Greek from Trachis who saw an opportunity for personal gain. He went to Xerxes personally and revealed a hidden mountain trail that led around the Spartans' position. That night, Ephialtes guided Persian troops through the pass. By sunrise, they had descended behind the Spartan army. Leonidas and his men woke up to find themselves trapped. The Persians attacked from both sides. Leonidas was lost in the battle. and the remaining Spartans fought until they were overwhelmed. By the end of the day, none of them were left alive. With the Greek defense at Thermopylae destroyed, Xerxes' army marched south, attacked Athens, and nearly conquered Greece. But what happened to Ephialtes? Well, his actions did not bring him the reward he hoped for. When the Greeks later rallied and defeated the Persians, he was declared a traitor. He went into hiding, and a bounty was placed on his head. Years later, he lost his life to another Greek, though some accounts say it was over an unrelated dispute. Thank you very much for watching the video and making it to the end. If you learned something, leave a like, and let us know in the comments what you think about these guys. There should be another video on your screen right now that YouTube thinks you might want to watch, so check it out. Thanks again. See you next time.